Okay, well, thank you, Jim. I'm trying to remember. I think this is my 4th or 5th time speaking at Jim's boot camp. I think this is 4, but I'm not sure. I know there's some videos floating around out there. Walter plays one for his land trust course that I did on land trust back when I had a Pepto-Bismol pink slideshow. I know some of you remember the vomit on the
YouTube
channel. It's on Jim's YouTube channel. I'm actually not going to do a big PowerPoint presentation because I find that I am a much worse speaker if I've got bullet points behind me. So I just have the outline on my computer. I'll show you a couple of slides. I do tend to talk fast. Those of you who've heard me before know that. So I'll try to go slow. This is, first of all, thanks for putting me after lunch when everybody's had turkey and tryptophan, and I'm the lawyer and the boring topics. So anyway, you guys try to stay awake. Please try to stay awake. I'm going to try to stay awake for you, so you can try to stay awake for me. But this is a little bit different topic than I usually speak on. I'm usually doing some sort of legal topic or specific investing topic, and this time I'm doing the do's and don'ts of wealth building, which I don't think do's has a apostrophe in it, but then it just looked like DOS on the computer, so I put the apostrophe in there. Probably not grammatically correct. Anyway, it's a little bit broader topic than I usually speak on. I know we have a huge variety of investors in this room, some who are brand new, have not even started, some who are highly seasoned. For some of you, this presentation will be like drinking from a fire hose. For some of you, this presentation will be so boring you'll probably want to step out, and I will not be offended if you do that. It's because I'm trying to walk the line between basic and advanced, so just bear with me on that. I have come to the conclusion that, of course, there is a life cycle of wealth, and I'm assuming that most of you are in this room because you're interested in wealth building. Anybody in here not interested in wealth building? Show of hands. Nobody, everybody wants to be broke? Nobody wants to be broke? Well, in wealth building, obviously you have to start by making some money unless you win the lottery or get a large inheritance or gift. So the first step in the life cycle of wealth is, of course, making the money. Then you've got to figure out the best way to grow that money, make it bigger, because we all want bigger and more money, and, you know, we want to retire financially free. Well, once you've grown it or you're continuing to grow it, it's also about how much you can keep. Somebody said that already today. It's not just what you make, it's how much you keep. So the third cycle of the wealth, life cycle of wealth is keeping as much as possible. So we're going to talk about all of these things in greater detail. But the fourth piece that has been mentioned here today is leave a legacy. And I agree with, I think it was David Phelps who said, a legacy is not just financial. A legacy to me is also personal. How do you want to be perceived in life? And you saw David's dad who said how he wanted to be remembered. I actually have thought about this for the last 2 years since my stepfather died, who was a huge mentor to me. He married my mom when I was 15, and I've learned a lot from him. And he died at 95. And at his funeral, we said he would have wanted to be remembered as kind. And that's what David's father said, and that's what I've always thought. I would want to be remembered as kind. I can be remembered for talking up here and all these things, but my legacy is I want to be kind. I want to help people, and I know that there are a lot of people in this room who feel the same way. Jim being the biggest example in this room that I can think of. My tribe is here. A lot of my best friends that I've met through Jim and other of these types of boot camps are all here. Most of them are in the back tables. We've got some friends from Asheville, and I think you guys should be applauded for being here. This is awesome. I need to shout out to my stepdaughter, Taryn, who's in the back of the room. She's not going to like that. But I got, Taryn, kick a bell. So I am 56 and a half years old and got remarried not quite 2 years ago. So I was an older bride, and it came along with 3 beautiful adult stepchildren, and I have 3 of my own children. So now we're the Brady Bunch. We have 6 kids, except they're 4 boys and 2 girls. But in any event, Taryn is a real estate agent in Asheville, and she is starting her journey as a real estate investor. So any of you who want to help her out, I would be appreciative. She's awesome and will soak up all your knowledge. All right. So this life cycle of wealth, we have to start with the making the money. And I do want to uncover one slide that you have for me. It's that cash flow quadrant. How many in here have read Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant? So a lot of people. And I know Jim put a similar slide up a couple years ago. But there are basically 4 ways to produce income, right? You're on the first part of the life cycle, making the money. You start out, most of us, as an employee, right? You come out of school, whether that's high school or college or trade school, you're working for someone else. Most people don't start out as self-employed or building their own business. You start out as an employee. And that works great, except you're just trading time for dollars, right? We're all in this room trying to not just be somebody else's employee. So that's a very active type of income, an employee income. We want to try to move next into the self-employment way to make income. A lot of entrepreneurs then become self-employed. Like for me as a lawyer, I worked for a law firm for many, many years, and then I started my own law firm. So I was self-employed. That felt great. Hey, I'm a business owner. Not really. I owned it, but I just bought myself a job. I was my own employee now, but I was still trading time for dollars. So then you want to become a business owner. And the two on the right side, the business owner and investor, are the more passive types of income production. So as a business owner, you know you're a true business owner when you can walk away from your business for 6 weeks and not be needed because you have the right systems, the right people in the right seats, and all you're doing is just a little bit of management from your backpack business in Europe, right? So a business owner is a step you want to strive to if you want to have a business, and most real estate investors have a business of some sort. But this room, we're probably all striving to be investors as the way to make our money and grow our money, because the investor is really when your money is making money for you. So my little dollars are out there like little soldiers marching around making money for me, whether I'm asleep or eating lunch or hanging out with Jim, hanging out with Joyce. My money is making money. I don't have to manage it, a little bit, but not like actual employees, not like a real active business. So on the making money part, these are the 4 different ways to produce it. And I think we all have to start figuring out, where are you right now? Where are you in that quadrant? Are you an employee, self-employed, a business owner, or an investor? Once you know where you're starting, then you decide, well, where do you want to go? This is all part of how you build wealth. You got to always know where you're starting and where you want to end up, right? And then you figure out the path to go to get from where you are to where you want to be. And what is your timeline from where you are now to where you want to end up? You have to know all of that so you know what type of path to take. Part of that is deciding what resources do you have at your disposal right now. Do you have a lot of time or not a lot of time? Do you have a lot of your own money or none of your own money? Do you have a lot of knowledge and experience or no knowledge and experience, or somewhere in between? What is your willingness to go outside of your comfort zone? Jim talked about that, being outside of the comfort zone. I'm outside of my comfort zone with this talk because I've never given this talk before. Given many, many talks, never given this talk. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be too basic. It's going to be, but go outside of your comfort zone. Jim said he wanted me to do this topic. I just said, okay, and figured I'd figure out how to do it later. Anyway, and I think that's Richard Branson that has that quote that says, if someone asks you to do something you don't know how to do, you just say yes and then go figure out how to do it. I love that quote. All right, so obviously when you're making money, regardless of which quadrant you're in, it's either going to fall into salary or savings or a gift or your retirement plan. Figure out where you have. Do you have cash flow from other investments? And, what type of money do you need? Do you just need money to pay your bills right now and you can't even think beyond that point? Or are you already self-sufficient in your eat money, as Walter would say, and you don't need any eat money, but you need money to grow your investments? So pay attention to that and write these things down, kind of figure it out. If you're in the stage where you're trying to gain money, and I'm speaking because I have a child in the room who's very good with money, so this is not really directed at her, but I tell my other children, my boys who aren't as good with money, don't overspend. Spend wisely and budget for your savings, because that's the beginning of your seed money. And then keep your end goal in mind. That's all. This is not rocket science. You know this stuff. How many of you know who Jim Rohn was? Who follows Jim Rohn? Great guy. R-O-H-N is his last name. For those of you who don't know, you should read everything Jim Rohn ever wrote or said. He has a great quote that I like that says, poor people spend their money and save what's left. Rich people save their money and spend what's left, right? And so I think for real estate investors, that's a great place to start. Save your money and spend what's left, and you start building your nest egg to do your real estate investments. So when you want to grow your money, what are the ways you can do it? Well, you need to have your money make some money, or have other people's money make money. Keep in mind, you don't need your own money to invest. Where's my friend Lori Eubanks back there? Lori retired at how old, Lori? 33? 33? From Capital One Bank after 6 years of real estate investing with other people's money. Lori is now one of the most successful and powerful real estate investors that I know. She is hugely generous with her time and knowledge, and you guys should all get to know her if you don't. She's here in Richmond. She's awesome. But Lori used other people's money, and I know because she's used mine. I'm a private lender, and I have done a number of deals with Lori where it's been mutually beneficial for both of us. So I hear a lot of investors, or want to be investors, go, well, I can't start yet because I don't have any money. Who has ever said that here? Be honest, I have. Right? We say that. Well, I have learned that that is a myth because there are people like Lori and a lot of other people in this room who have never spent their own money until they, were quite high up in the net worth, but they got there by using other people's money and helping other people get what they needed so they could get themselves what they needed. So don't think you have to have your own money. But once you start investing and you want to grow your money, you obviously have the traditional investments like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And I'm like David Phelps, the only time I ended up in the stock market is if I inherited some money, and then I try to sell that and invest it in real estate as quickly as possible, because even though I was an economics major, I don't understand the stock market, and I have seen it go from, 100 to 50 in one day, and I've lost tons of money, so I don't like the stock market. So I prefer alternative investments myself, which I'm assuming you guys do, and that's why you're in this room. So what are those alternative investments? Real estate, obviously. But that's not just buying land and houses and whatnot. It's also maybe investing in notes. It's private lending. It's single-family homes, multifamily homes, commercial space, office space, retail space, mobile home parks, raw land, options, lease options, private placements with mutual fund type things based with real estate. It goes on and on, right? You guys know that. So wholesaling, we've been talking to my stepdaughter about wholesaling. So when I started trying to figure out what I wanted to be as a grown-up real estate investor, I got pretty overwhelmed because I was going to all these seminars, felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose because, Patty might be doing one thing and Lori's doing another and Wendy's doing another, and they all sound great, and I'm like, squirrel, I want to go do that. No, I should do that. Wait, oh my God, I'm only one person. I can't do all that. And I started getting really stressed out because I could not figure out what I wanted to do, right? So finally what I decided to do was to create an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm not a spreadsheet person, I'm not a geek in any way. Part of the reason you're not seeing my PowerPoint because I don't even know how the heck to do that very well, and I don't have a staff, so you don't want to see what's on my screen. But in any event, on my spreadsheet, I took across the top every way I had ever heard of to invest in real estate at the top of each column, whether that was being a single-family home landlord, owning apartment buildings, private lending, vacation rental, buy notes, performing, non-performing, all the different ways I could think of it. Everything I'd ever heard of, I put across the top. On the left-hand column, I wrote down everything I knew about myself, what my skill sets were, what I liked, what I was interested in doing, what I absolutely hated. And then I just went through and tried to match up my desires and skill sets with what I knew about each of those types of investing. So for instance, for me as a lawyer, I was really good at paperwork. I'm not intimidated by paperwork. I do that for a living, or did. I'm now retired and I'm a farmer. But anyway, so I could put a big X in the paperwork's good. I did not have a lot of time. So I had to put the X in the box that says don't have much time. I like people, so that was good. Some investors can't stand people, so you don't want to work in something you have to deal with people if you're that type of investor, right? I was okay with people, so I put an X in there. You see where I'm going with this? And then I just looked to see which columns had the most X's in it. And that helped me narrow my focus to what would probably match up best with my desires, my skill sets, my available time, my resources, and all that. So for any of you who are feeling overwhelmed and thinking you want to be what everybody else in this room is, I would suggest you try to narrow it down. Particularly if you're new as an investor, don't go off and try to do 5 different things. Pick one thing, maybe 2, do it really well, and focus on it. But that's how I specifically figured out what might be best for me. So I have ended up, just so you know a little bit about me, actually, I guess I should back up and tell you that. I have been an attorney actually about 29 years, which is hard for me to believe that next year it'll be 30 years since I passed the bar. That's crazy. I actually retired from the practice of law, I guess, last year, and moved to my farm in Kentucky, and I just bought a second farm. And we're not sure what we're doing with that yet. We're working on things, but In the investor world, I am a private lender, like I said. I have vacation rentals. I've been doing that since 2006. I've flipped a couple of homes, but I finally realized my taste is way too expensive for flipping, and I could never stay on budget, so I gave that up. I always wanted, like, the way I would want to live in it, and you flippers out there know you just can't do that, right? And so what else? I have a commercial office building, a couple of retail spaces, and things like that. So I try to keep my particular investing smaller in quantity, bigger in the dollars that come in. So I have, high-end vacation rentals that, maybe one of my vacation rentals takes a little more active work than single-family management, but I get per month what it would take me 10 to 20 rentals, single-family rentals, off one property, you see. So I chose that because that was better for me. But you'd have to figure out what works for you. But I would suggest you give some thought to that if you're not already actively investing, or if you are investing and you hate what you do, you can always go back and reinvent the wheel for yourself, right? If something's not working, tweak it. Figure out where you want to go and do something different. Once you figure out what you want to do, then of course you want to learn everything you can about it. That's why you're here, right? So I'm glad you're here. But before we go into that, that's later in the talk. We've talked about making the money, growing the money. How do you keep as much of the money as you can, right? Well, Nate told you one way, which is to invest with retirement dollars, particularly a Roth IRA, which is tax-free growth, right? So I know I've done the magic penny example here before, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. Magic penny example, anybody remember that example? Okay. So if you took a penny in your Roth IRA, so it's no taxes, as this penny grows, it's not subject to taxation, and you double that 1 cent every day for 30 days, somebody who has never heard this example, tell me what they think that penny would be worth on day 30.
What do you guys think? Shout it out.
Now, don't say if you've already heard this example.
100,000.
100,000. We got 100,000. Anybody else have a guess? Okay. Nope. All right. Well, I'm just going to tell you. That 1 penny, when it's not subject to taxation, which is the most destructive force in the universe, that 1 penny would be worth $5,368,709.12 on day 30. Now, I didn't believe that. I did the math. That's the number. That's the number. 1 cent becomes 2 cents, becomes 4 cents, becomes 8 cents. Well, by day 30, it's over $5 million, right? Now, let's say you invested outside of an IRA and you were subject to 28% income taxes. What do you think that penny would be worth on day 30 when it was subject to 28% income taxes?
40 grand.
40 grand's close. It's actually $67,658.90. So would you rather have 5 million plus or 67,000? The only difference in those two examples is a tax rate. That's it. So when you're thinking about investing and you've already gotten your EAT money, consider investing in a tax-free environment like a Roth IRA or 401k, because you can have a lot more impact for your future life. Now, if you're like Taryn and you're in your 20s and you're not going to be able to access your retirement plan for a while, you've got to balance that with making sure you can pay your bills. So some of your investing needs to be for your EAT money, right? But if you've got all your EAT money, I would look at tax advantage plans. All right, so one way to keep as much as you can, we just talked about, avoid taxes as much as possible. Number 2, protect your wealth. We've heard some things about asset protection. I missed part of the talk with you and Walter, but to me, asset protection is like layers of an onion. You guys have heard me say this before if you've ever heard me talk. So the first layer, the outside layer, is be a good steward of your asset, right? If you're a single family home owner, make sure you keep your properties maintained in a safe, habitable condition. Make sure your tenants have the snow melt if it's an icy place. Make sure the common area lighting works. All the things that make this a safe place. Be a good steward of your asset. The second layer of that onion is buy the best insurance you can afford. Right? People don't like to pay for insurance. Who likes to pay for insurance? Not me. I hate insurance. Sorry to the insurance people in here. But you know what? I have the absolute best insurance I can afford, and I make sure it is absolutely the right policy for the type of property that I have. For instance, my vacation rental properties, I cannot have your regular old landlord's policy. Well, I'm a landlord, but I'm a vacation rental landlord. So my regular landlord policy would not cover a slip and fall on my vacation rental. I have to have vacation rental coverage. So not only for liability do I want that, but also if something happens and I have to cancel a guest because the water line breaks, which has happened to me before, I had to cancel a guest, that vacation rental policy paid me my lost income for that weekend, right? So make sure you have the right type of insurance. So insurance is good for a couple of reasons. One of them is that when plaintiffs' lawyers, I wish Jeff Watson were here, when plaintiffs' lawyers are trying to decide who to sue, they're going to look for the lowest hanging fruit. And Jeff is a plaintiff's attorney, and he talks about this. And if there's a big fat insurance policy, they're going to go after that first, right? So have the insurance that you can afford. The other thing is your insurance company will generally pay for your defense because they're defending their policy. So I hate insurance and I love insurance, but anyway, definitely have it. And so now you've got the third layer was the insurance, or second layer, excuse me. Third layer is consider the right entity or trust structure. You know, Jim and Walter were talking about LLCs, land trusts, things like that. Take the time and the tediousness to structure your assets in the proper structure, whether it's through an LLC or a land trust or some combination thereof. That will help you, and we'll hopefully talk more about that in detail later. And then you may want to consider layering those entities and trusts. You know, do you have a house that's owned by a land trust that's got a beneficiary that's a personal property trust that has a beneficiary that's an LLC? You know, how far you layer depends on your tolerance for legal fees, tediousness, and how paranoid are you, right? But, and everybody's different. And I should say that as a lawyer, when I have talked to people, I came to the conclusion that all of this, real estate investing, asset protection, everything is on a continuum. I'll have some client who's down there on the left-hand side that wants to pay 0 legal fees, have 0 work involved, and doesn't give a whit about creditor protection. They're just putting everything in their own name on a wing and a prayer and hoping that nothing ever happens. Then you've got the people at the far end who have every single property in a separate land trust, in a separate LLC, and layer, and they don't care how much they pay me or anybody else, and they want the most protection with the most tediousness and the most money. Where you fall in that spectrum is a very personal decision for you, and you can talk to your professionals to try to help you arrive at your tolerance level and where you fall on that spectrum. But just realize at the cocktail party, if someone tells you they're doing XYZ, that may not fit your situation because you may be at a different place on that spectrum. So I see that a lot when I was practicing law, where people say, well, I need a revocable living trust because Joyce has one, and by gosh, she says it's the best thing since sliced bread. Well, Joyce's assets aren't the type that needs a revocable trust. I'm just making that up, but you see what I mean? Don't fall for the cocktail party fodder. You don't know whether that's for you or not. On the asset protection, you know, we've talked about the layers. One thing that I found that a lot of people don't know about asset protection is you have to put this plan in place before there's any potential claim, right? So you can't just sort of go along willy-nilly and then, oh my gosh, you run the stop sign and hit somebody's car, and then you call up the lawyer and run to the office the next day and start saying, I want to transfer all my assets into my spouse's name, or I need a trust, or I need this or that. Too late, because now that is a transfer with the intent to hinder, delay, or defraud your creditors or potential creditors. And the judge will set that aside, and you'll be back right where you were, and you just wasted a lot of money. So when you're doing your planning, you know, we're all good as investors at trying to figure out how to make the money. We plan for how to make the money. People don't plan for how to structure it properly and how to set that up from an estate planning standpoint and an asset protection standpoint. That needs to be done at the beginning. Get your trust and entity set up right and consider all these things at the beginning, or it's kind of a waste of your time and money. I just want to say that, you know, there are a lot of people who use land trusts. I've used some. I've used personal property trusts all the time to lend through. I do see a lot of misinformation about land trusts, and please realize that a land trust is not an automatic creditor protection screen. It provides a smoke screen, and it provides anonymity, and it can help, but it is not like a state-mandated creditor protection wall. So just, you'll have to learn more about land trusts, but just use them, but know what you're doing. So we talked a little bit about the legacy. I just want to reiterate, to me, there's personal legacy and there's financial legacy. Personal legacy, how do you want to run your life right now to be a role model to others, to be a mentor, to be the type of person that others look up to? Maybe you don't care. There are some people I've met, I know they don't care at all. What people think of them, they don't care. They're not going to help anybody. They don't care. And then there are people who will go out of their way, like Jim and Cheryl, to help everybody in any way they can. And where you fall is also a spectrum, right? You have to decide where you are in that. In terms of your financial legacy, we're all working really hard to build up this wealth. And if we're all blessed, we die with the last penny, spent if we didn't care about leaving it to anybody. But most people have loved ones or charities they want to leave a legacy for. They want to be known for something, and they've worked very hard, and they want to pass it on. If you're going to work this hard to grow it and keep it, please do your estate plan or your legacy planning appropriately so that you can give what I've always called the ultimate love letter to the people that you love or the organizations that you love. Set it up right so that if you die, when you die, it's just seamless and it goes the way you want it to go, and people can just go about the business grieving for you and not be locked in a battle with their siblings, a battle with their stepmom, right, Taryn? A battle with anybody. They can just grieve. They don't have to go through the headache of trying to figure out where is all your stuff, who is it supposed to go to, fighting over the family photographs. I've seen horrific things where families never speak to each other again, literally over something as simple as, I know you have more of mom and dad's photographs than you're telling me. And siblings won't talk to each other for the rest of their lives over that. It's devastating. And I will say that the stuff is what people argue about even more than the money. And I know that's hard to believe, but that's the God's honest truth right there. All right, so now we've talked about the general life cycle of wealth. Make money, grow your money, keep as much as you can, leave a legacy. Well, how do you get there? How do you do that? How do you make that life cycle work? Well, again, you have to go back, well, where are you starting? If you're starting at the very beginning, like Taryn is, well, that's an easy place to start. You're not doing anything, so you just start something, right? If you're already involved in it, how do you level up? That's the name of our women's mastermind, by the way, Level Up, because we're all trying to help each other level up. And everybody in this room should be helping their financial network level up. That's what we all should be doing. How do you level up? Well, for me, the first step is create your mindset. And I know Jim is really good at that. A lot of people in this room that I know are very, very good at that. And one of those things to start with is start with your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to create this wealth? Is it just so you can go travel to Europe all the time? That's a great purpose. Is it because, for me, I have a passion for food insecurity. So I want to contribute money to organizations that help people eat. And I want to grow a heck of a lot of vegetables so I can feed people too. That's my why. I mean, I have kids, and obviously I want to leave stuff to them. But, my why is really, how can I be the best steward of this earth while I'm here? And those are my two whys. So start with your why, because that gives you a strong motivation. If your car flips over in a ditch and you're looking at it, whether you should try to pick it up and flip it back over, your answer is going to be different depending on whether your child is under that car, right? How strong is your why? If it's just in a ditch, it was an old beat up car, you really don't care about the car, you're going to brush yourself off and you're going to walk away. You don't have a strong enough why to go through the heck of flipping that car over. But if your child is pinned under that car, you better believe your why is big enough to do everything in your power to flip that car. And you've heard about people with adrenaline surges that can flip a car. That's because they had a strong why, right? So start with a very strong why, and it will be different for every single one of you. Set your goals, and I know this sounds like blah, blah, blah. Everybody says that, but it's true. Write them down. Start with long-term, short-term, somewhere in between. Revisit them frequently. Then determine your skill set. For me, I had to sit there and think, well, what am I good at? What do I stink at? Flipping. I stink at flipping. It looks pretty, but I don't make any money. Know what your resources are and know where you have weak spots. And once you know what your weak spots are, go invest in education. And I mean that word invest, not spend. It is an investment in you. It's an investment in your future. An investment in your legacy is to go get educated. That can be at live events like Jim's event. That can be reading books, listening to podcasts, watching webinars. I don't care how you do it, listening to books, but invest in your education, because you're not going to go far without an education and a tribe, a network. Once you know where you want to go, you're going to choose your strategy. That's determining where you want to go. And that's where I came in with the Excel spreadsheet, trying to figure out what my investing strategy was going to be. And then once I knew that, it's, okay, prepare to work your plan. What does that look? You know, you've heard if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Everybody's heard that. So you have to make a plan, and then you got to work that plan. Because beautiful plan on a whiteboard, and if you just sit on the couch and watch soap operas, your plan ain't going to happen, right? You got to work it. So you got to get focused, and there's some great books out there, by the way. The One Thing by Gary Keller is a good book. Essentialism by Max McEwen, I think is how you pronounce his name. It's a good book. So get focused, take dedicated and consistent action. Maybe every day, every other day, whatever schedule you decide, figure out, I'm going to take at least one action step today. What's it going to be? One action step. You know, for a child of mine who struggles with depression, some days that action step is just to get outside for 5 minutes, because otherwise he'd lie in his bedroom all day. You know, it's one thing. It doesn't have to be big. Create your systems. Everything, no matter how simple, has a system. Do you know when you take a shower in the morning, you have a system? Who washes their body the exact same way every time? Because I do. I didn't think about it, but it's a system. I get in, I put my towel in a certain place, I got my shampoo in a certain place, I wash this arm, watch that, you know, whatever. It's a system. It's not written down, but it's a system. The next step is build your team. I do not have a team for my shower. Let me just tell you that. I do it all by myself. No tribe, no team. It's a single woman sport in the shower. All right. So, build your team, find your tribe. That, to me, is the network Jim's talking about. Your network is your net worth. We've been saying that for years in this crowd. I love my tribe. When I got married 2 years ago on my farm in Kentucky, not quite 2 years ago, my wedding guests were, by and large, my real estate investor friends, and several of you were in this room, who came from all over the country and even other countries to this little old farm in Kentucky. Well, not so little, but a farm in Kentucky in the middle of nowhere, Gravel Switch. There's not even a stoplight, I kid you not. It's called Gravel Switch, Kentucky. Anyway, and they were my real estate investor friends because of things like this. And they're the people that I do deals with, that I buy properties from, that I loan money to. And they're my best friends in the world now, all because I started as real estate investing. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Never be the smartest person in the room, by the way, when you're investing in your education. If your goal is to go look the best and the brightest, you're never going to succeed. You should be in rooms like this where there are smarter people. I'm always looking for rooms where there are smarter people, and everywhere I go, I find them, because somebody knows something I don't know. And I try to get as much information as I can, and that's a huge, will hugely push you further. And have an open mind. Right? I know a lot of people who say, well, I'm only going to be a single-family home owner. I'm only going to be this. Have an open mind. You never know where your next best strategy is going to come from, your next best mentor, your next best friend, your next spouse. I mean, speaking from one who's had two, I hope, you know, for those of you who are married, don't get divorced to make that happen. But anyway, if divorce happens to come to your world uninvited, you know, there's hope, right, Joyce? She was there. Okay, so you've created the mindset, you've made your plan, you're working your plan. Be proactive in whatever it is you're doing. And I'm going to put my lawyer hat on a little bit here. And you've heard me talk about this in this group before. When you're looking at the law as a lawyer, there are two ways people use the law. Either as a shield to hopefully prevent a problem, or as a sword to fight the battle once a problem has happened, right? It is always cheaper and always less brain damaging and less stressful to use the shield of the law than the sword of the law. I guarantee you. Most people come to lawyers when they need a lawyer to fight a battle, not when they need the lawyer to set things up right. And what happens if if people had come to me to set things up right at the beginning, they would have paid a lot less money and had a lot less headache than they did when they thought they could do it themselves or on LegalZoom or whatever. And then they had to hire me to fix the problem. And it was tens of thousands of dollars more. So be proactive. You know, don't stick your head in the sand. Pay the money to the lawyers, the CPAs, the insurance people, whatever it is, and get things set up correctly. Here's one of my favorite quotes I saw actually in my dentist's office. If you cannot afford to prevent the problem, how are you going to afford to fix the problem itself? That is so true. Just think about that. You go to get your teeth cleaned, it's $100, whatever. I don't even know what it is right now, but if you don't do anything and now you've got to have, dental work, it's a heck of a lot more expensive. All right, so the first thing I think people need to be proactive about, besides their mindset, is the proper entity and trust structure. And answering all your questions about that is way beyond the scope today. I'm just going to tell you some of the things that come into consideration when we're determining what type of structure to set up for a person. Whether that's an LLC, a corporation, an LLC taxed as a corporation, a land trust, a personal property trust, a revocable trust. Lots of different types of structures. And every time we're looking at factors, we're looking at, what is this business you're trying to do? What are the tax implications of how you want to run it? How do you want to get money in and out of it? How do you want to manage it? What's the easiest way and most efficient way to manage this business? How do you want to prevent creditor, how do you want to do creditor protection? What type of ownership flexibility do you need? Do you have people bringing different things to the table? Somebody's bringing money, somebody's bringing sweat equity. Different entities work better depending on how the ownership is set up. What's your exit strategy? That's a big one. For instance, generally speaking, you should never own your rental property in an S corporation. A flip is okay, but don't own a long-term hold in an S corporation. So if I'm setting up an entity to be a buy and hold person, I don't want to set it up taxed as an S corporation. And I want to know my exit strategy is to buy and hold this and one day sell them as appreciated real estate. I don't want to be taxed as an S corporation, things like that. Your desired method of raising funds. Are you going to have private lenders? Or are you going to have investors? Are you going to do a private placement? Or is it just your buddies, your family? Know all these things. What type of employee benefits do you want to offer to your team if you have one? These will all help decide what type of structure. This is not, at least initially until you learn it, a do-it-yourself thing. And I'm not soliciting business because I'm not really very hireable right now. But find somebody who is hireable and hire them to help you set all this up. I am hireable, by the way, if you want to come to my farm in Kentucky for 2 days and pay me a minimum $5,000, I'll solve all your world's problems, but not less than that. Okay. So you've got the right structure, you're proactive about that. Now you need the right team, right? You can't do everything yourself. Believe me, I'm trying and it is not working. So there's someone in the back there that's supposed to be moving to Kentucky to help me, and I can say no names, but in any event, I've had to be pretty brutally honest about what roles I can fill in my investor business and what roles I can't. And I thought I could do it all. I'm a super mom, I can do it all. No, can't. So what roles need to be filled? What type of person is best for each role? Now, there's a little tediousness in this, but I know a lot of friends who say, give your potential employees a personality profile test, the DISC test or something like that, and learn what that means, what their personality profile is. You don't want the same people who have your personality. You need them to fill different roles you can't or won't do, so they probably need a different personality. So figure out which personalities go best with whatever avatar you need for that person on your team. And when I say avatar, I've literally created the avatars. I didn't know what that word meant for a long time. I thought it was that movie, Avatar, all the blue creatures. But anyway, finally someone said, no, it's where you write down what it is you're looking for in someone. I'm like, you mean like in a boyfriend? Before I got married. And I did create a boyfriend avatar, and now I'm married to him, just by the way. It works. But create an avatar for what you need to fill whatever roles you're trying to fill in your business. Describe that person. What type of personality traits would they have? And this is all very basic, but it will make your life easier because you hire the wrong people, you hire them too quickly, you fire them too slowly, it's going to suck. It's terrible. I've done it. I don't recommend it. So figure out who you need, give them the personality profile test, hire slowly, and then fire quickly if you need to. You'll have to decide whether you need somebody in person or a virtual assistant. Everybody says, Mary, you need a VA. I'm like, no, I need someone sitting right over my left shoulder telling me what to do because I won't even manage a VA right. So anyway, do that. All right, so you've got your goals, you've got your mindset, you've got your right structure, your right team. Now you need the right systems. I'm not a systems person, so I'm hiring that out. But that's part of what systems will get you to your goals. And systems are important. Written goals, written operating procedures, written job descriptions. There's the book Traction by Gino Wickman. How many people have read that book, The Entrepreneurial Operating System? If you guys are entrepreneurs and business owners, I highly suggest you read that book. If you're anything other than just you, and even if you're just you, it probably helps, right? Back there in the back. All right. The next phase for me, once you've got your entity, your team, your systems, you're all ready to go, right? Potential deal comes in. What do you have to do? It's the number one thing. Thorough due diligence. And this is not a joke. People go, oh, DD, I got a 2-week DD period when I bought my house. It's not what I'm talking about, right? This is due diligence. What information do you need to know to find out whether this deal is going to build your wealth or crash your wealth? Because they can happen either way. So the first thing that I like to do is vet the people. A lot of times people say, well, you're a private money lender, you're just supposed to vet the property. I'm like, oh no, I vet the people. And I loan to people that I know, like, and trust. Very rarely have I loaned to people that I haven't spent some substantial time with in groups like this. And every time I've done that, I've regretted it. So now before I meet new people or loan to new people, I want to know them. I want to know how they think. I want to see how they operate in the world, right? And I haven't had any bad people, so this is not a bad story that way. It's just that some things were more difficult if we didn't understand how each other communicated or what we did, right? So vet the people in the deal. I think one thing that people don't ask is, can the other person in the deal tell you the backstory of this deal? Do they have enough details? Why is it a good deal? What drew them to that deal? Why are they doing this? Why do they need you? I want my people to be able to tell me a great story that doesn't seem like a lie. That tells me that they've done some due diligence and they've looked at this deal pretty clearly. Check references. One thing that I would also recommend, when you're talking to the potential person you might want to do a deal with, flat out ask them about a deal that went bad. Tell me about a deal that went bad. Tell me what you did when it went bad. How did you and the other side of the deal work things out? What was the end result? What happened? I've never asked that question, but as I'm writing my outline, I'm thinking, that'd be a darn good question to ask. Because if someone refused to tell me, red flag, run, Forrest, run, right? I'd be gone. I know there is a Forrest in this room. Where's Forrest? He's in here somewhere. But anyway, I would be gone. If someone, if someone asked me something that I messed up on, I'd be honest about it, and I'd tell them, and here's how I fixed it. None of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. I don't have a problem with somebody making a mistake in a deal or having a deal go south. I want to know what they did to make it right. And you should too when you're doing a deal. All right, check the facts. Did they do what they said they did? So I've often used a new borrower experience verification worksheet, which is a fancy name for an Excel spreadsheet I ask new borrowers to put together that says, give me the addresses of all the properties you rehabbed in the last 12 months. Tell me what you bought them for, what you spent on the rehab, and what you sold them for. I have a couple reasons to do that. One is I want to know if they're willing to jump through that hoop, because it's not that hard to do. And if they're not willing to jump through that hoop, that tells me either they're going to be difficult to work with, they didn't keep good records so they can't jump through that hoop, or they're lying to people about what they made on the property. So why don't I ask them what they made, what they sold it for? Because I can go check that in the public records. I can find out what they sold it for. And if I've got a potential borrower who's lying to me about the profit they made in a deal, do you think I'm going to loan money to them? No. So do your due diligence on the person. Be nosy. Check their credit report. Check their criminal history. Do they have bankruptcy filings? You can get around a bankruptcy filing. It happens. I know great people who were forced into bankruptcy filings in 2008. Again, it's not the fact that something bad went down, it's how it was dealt with, right? Look at their social media posts. Are these people crazy? Because there are some crazy people out there. And I used to be, and I'm still very nice, and I used to just be, oh, everybody's okay, everybody's different, it's okay. Now I'm like, no, there's some freaking crazy whacked out people there, and I'm not going to lend to them or do a deal with them. So look at their social media. Are they positive? Are they whiners? Or are they crazy? All right, so you vetted the person and they look pretty good. Okay, I'd work with that person. Now you have to vet the deal. Whatever that deal is. That means look at the property involved, look at the area involved. Let's say that I'm lending to someone on a house that's going to be my first lien position. I want to look at the comps on that house. I want to look at photographs of that house. I want to do Google Earth searches of the neighborhood. I want to do the little wide-angle lens to see whether there are junky cars parked in the street or there are drug deals going down on the corner. Has everybody mowed their lawn and is beautiful with begonias on the front porch? I want to know what that neighborhood feels like, even if I can't go there. Because I want to know, that tells me partly my exit strategy, what would I want to do with that property if I had to take it back. It tells me whether I would send my mother there to get a rent check, right? Or whether I'd feel comfortable walking down there without packing heat, right? I want to know my comfort level with that actual property. And I'm not going to loan any more on a piece of property than I would pay to buy that piece of property, because that may be what I'm doing if I have to take that property back. Now, I've been fortunate, and I've been loaning since 2005. I've never had to take a property back. I don't want to take the property back. I want the flipper to make the money. I want to make some money, obviously, but I don't want the property. But I want to know if I have to take it, that I'm not going to lose all my wealth because I had to take back a dog of a property. So check everything. Review all the documents that are being put forth to you. And I don't mean just look at the title on the document, which I know a lot of you people do. Oh, yeah, it says promissory note, we're good. No, you have to read every term in that document, because one word can make a difference. And the reason that I've never had to take a property back is because when deals have started to go south, which they will inevitably do, my paperwork has saved my bacon, because it's detailed, it's not vague, and it's clear from the start what that paperwork is intended to do. So review all that paperwork, read it. If you need a lawyer to decipher it at least the first time, have a lawyer decipher it. And lastly, trust your gut. You know, you're standing in front of a person, they're trying to get you to do a deal. Something smell off? Does their facts just not seem right? Do they have a weird tick when they're lying to you because they're not going to look you in the eye? They don't have a firm handshake. Whatever it is you use to judge whether something's off, trust your gut. It'll serve you right every time. All right, so now you've vetted the person, you've vetted the deal, vet the paperwork. Most of the times, in my case as a private lender, somebody else is preparing the paperwork. I don't usually prepare it. It's usually the borrower's attorney who's preparing the paperwork. Well, I want to read it very, very carefully. I want to make sure it's the right documents being used. Is a deed of trust being used in a deed of trust state and not a mortgage document? Is it the right contract? Is it the right promissory note? Is it the right terms? You know, all that in it. Who prepared it? Are they looking out for my interests? Probably not. So if they're the borrower's attorney, for instance, then I need to make sure I review that paperwork really well, because they're not looking out for me. I'm looking out for me, or my attorney is. What state's law is control if there's a dispute? If I have to go into court, what state am I going to be hauled into? That might make a difference for me. What's that state's laws like? If anything needs to be recorded, please have it notarized. So a lot of times people go to record something, they never had it notarized, and at least in North Carolina where I practiced, you could not notarize it. I mean, you could not record it without a notary. Okay. Big thing I see is the paperwork is short, sweet, to the point. It's great on the one hand, but it leaves out a lot of stuff that should probably be in that document. Are all your potential exit strategies documented in those documents? If you're in a partnership with someone or an LLC, do you have buy-sell agreements to say what happens if, you know, Joyce, if you want to run off to Hawaii and leave an LLC, what happens? Do you have to offer your shares to the other members? Do you get bought out? What happens? You know, things go south. What's the exit strategy? Is the document written in such a way that it's enforceable, meaning reasonable people would know what that document meant? If it's vague, it's not enforceable. Just because you guys sat over coffee and knew what you were talking about doesn't mean that a court could enforce it. If there's an entity or a trust involved, make sure it's in good standing. Does it have the requisite power to enter into a deal? Is an LLC in good standing with the state? Because if it's not, it can't enter into a deal, right? Who's signing on behalf of that entity or trust? I want to know, is the right person signing the paperwork? If it's an LLC, is it the person that has the authority to sign on behalf of the LLC? Is it the trustee in a trust? Or is it just somebody that says, yeah, I'm going to sign that, and it means nothing? You might as well not have the paperwork, all right? Trust your gut. Again, know your exit strategies in a deal. Have a plan A, B, and C. Run the numbers and run them again. This is basic. I said this will be a very basic presentation, but sometimes we all need a reminder, because particularly if you've been doing this for a long time, you might get kind of complacent. I know I have before, and I wish I hadn't when I did, right? So don't be complacent. Stay on top of things. If you, like for me, if I've got loans out there, let's say I've got 10 loans out there, checks are coming in, am I paying attention really to whether somebody sent me the check that month? I better be. I better be marking it down. If it's going to my IRA, I better be mailing it off to my IRA custodian. You know, stay on top of it. Keep good records. And lastly on this topic, please, for the love of everything sacred, communicate with the other party and make them communicate with you. It's very important, because human nature is to assume the worst. And if you don't hear from the other side, or they don't hear from you, they're going to assume the worst. You're going to assume the worst. Pretty soon people are getting defensive, and it blows up. Please communicate often and timely. Review your systems on a regular basis. Are they working the way you thought they would when you set them up? If not, tweak them, right? Don't be afraid to change your tactics. Next, deal with others honorably. This really shouldn't have to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway, because there are a lot of people that treat things a lot of different ways. And here's what honorably means to me. Say what you mean and mean what you say. That's pretty clear, right? Under promise and over deliver. For instance, this is totally out of the real estate investing thing, but I just got really overly ambitious and I ordered thousands and thousands of seeds for my farm, vegetables and cut flowers, because we're going to try to grow. I kill houseplants, so I don't know what I'm thinking about this. But anyway, luckily my husband is a good gardener. But so I have all these seeds that we're getting ready to plant, and everybody says, oh, you're going to do CSA shares, you know, community supported agriculture, and gosh, you're going to make so much money, you'll be able to sell all these vegetables and flowers. I'm like, nope. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, nope. Why? Because I don't even know if I can grow anything. I'm not going to promise somebody a basket full of vegetables and flowers every week when I've never grown a thing in my life. What if I suck at it? I'm not going to promise that. So thankfully, I have real estate investments that are providing, quote unquote, the seed money for my seeds. So I don't have to go sell subscriptions to CSA shares because my vacation rentals are buying all my vegetable and flower seeds. But if I were to promise CSA shares, I could be over-promising and under-delivering until I have a proven concept. So I'm not going to do that. Try not to assume the worst, like I just told you everybody does. It's going to happen. But ask questions, and remember that people can't read your mind. I often find that whether it's my clients or my other parties in the deal or my children or even my husband, I always assume they know what I'm thinking. Isn't it written on my face? Don't you know me well enough to know what I'm thinking? No. Your own mother doesn't know you well enough to know what you're thinking. So please communicate. And one thing that's important to me, and I have found that it has helped me build wealth as opposed to lose wealth, is realizing that life is not a zero-sum game. You guys know what that means? Zero-sum game means that everything's a sum of zero. So if I'm going to win, you have to lose. If you win, I lose. It's like a seesaw. Life is not like that. In my experience, in my almost 57 years, life is abundant. And I think it was Jim Rohn who said this, I may be wrong, but if you help another people, maybe it's Zig Ziglar, but if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get everything you need and more. And I believe that. And I believe in that quote, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Be out there, be the tribe for this group of people, help each other. Jim said pray for your inner circle. Absolutely. And realize that you don't have to win at somebody else's expense. You can all win. And on the dealing with others honorably, one of my favorite quotes from Warren Buffett is, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently, right? 20 years to build it, 5 minutes to ruin it. The other thing he said, which I love, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. You understand what that means? So it took me a minute, okay, well, I mean, I've skinny dipped and I get it, but I didn't get it, and then I had to think about it. And really, what that means to me is that when everything's going well, everybody looks like they have on great bathing suits, no, but you don't know. You don't know who's covering up what, or who's hiding what, or who's not hiding what, right? But when things start to go south, you really find out what the other person's like, that they've been swimming naked all along because they don't have integrity or they don't have character, or maybe they do. You know, I'm not going to assume the worst, but just keep in mind that. How are we doing on time? So you might know how our time is? Okay, I'm going to keep going until somebody tells me to shut up. How much time do I have left, Chip?
How much more time do you want?
What, 5 days? I don't know. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about selected topics, which tend to be more the legal topics, and I've touched on some of it along the way, but I do want to touch on a few things I see over and over and over again. I want to talk first about business partnerships and joint ventures. So when I say business partnerships, I'm speaking very loosely. That could be a true partnership, general partnership. It could be a limited partnership, an LLC, you know, whatever. But a business partnership or a joint venture. Whatever it is, please clarify the relationship in writing before anything gets done. It's kind of like the prenup in the business world, right? If you're going into the prenup before you get married and you don't know whether anything is going to go wrong in the marriage, or if so, who's going to be the bad actor, who's going to want to leave, and who's not going to want to be left, if it's an even playing field, then the terms of the prenup or the document are going to be more fair to everybody if something happens down the road, because you don't know what role you're playing in that. Same thing with a business deal. When you're going into it and everybody's happy and optimistic and you need each other and you love each other, write it all down and make sure it's clear and everybody understands. Because I can guarantee you, once one little thing starts to go south, if you don't have it in writing, you're off to the courts or you feel terrible. Just write it down. So that relationship, by the way, it's important if you're just a joint venture, that in your joint venture agreement, you state explicitly that this is not to be deemed a partnership. And I want to tell you why. Anybody familiar with that? Do you know where I'm going? I see a confused look. Anybody know why I'm saying that? In the law, a general partnership can be deemed from the facts and circumstances to have occurred when two or more persons come together to perform business for the purpose of obtaining a profit. Regardless of whether there's a written partnership agreement, regardless of whether it's designated a partnership under the laws of any state or anything else. It's called a de facto partnership. Just by the facts alone, if Joyce and I, sorry, you're sitting in the front, Joyce, keep picking on you, but Joyce and I go together and we start doing a deal together and we don't have it in writing what our deal is, and we're both hoping to make some profit, we're probably going to be deemed a general partnership if something goes wrong. Now, what does that mean? In a general partnership, each general partner is 100% liable for the actions not only of themselves, but of their general partner. So if Joyce gets a crazy wild hair and goes out and racks up $1 million in debt for our little joint venture that we didn't call a joint venture, we said it was deemed a partnership, I'm now personally liable for it. There's no limited liability with a general partnership for either partner. However, if you and I are going into it and we specifically do not want to be deemed a partnership, we're just a joint venture, we're just working this together because we're our tribe, right? Well, if we say in our joint venture agreement, this shall not be deemed a partnership under the laws of any state, boom, we just solved that problem. We'll never be deemed by a court to be a partnership causing limited general liability for the actions of the other. Do you see how important that can be? That's one sentence. One sentence in a document that's critically, critically important. When you do your documents for a business partnership or a joint venture, obviously know your exit strategies if things go south. Have them all written out in the document. What are the possibilities? Try to address every situation you can think of. It may seem overkill. You'll appreciate it if things start to go south. You will appreciate it. If at all possible, and nobody ever listens to me on this one, if at all possible, avoid 50-50 deals, period. What happens in a 50-50 partnership or 50-50 JV if you haven't said anything in your document? What happens if you don't agree? You're dead in the water because nobody has the authority to make a decision. It's 50-50. By definition, you each have to agree or nothing happens, right? You can't even decide to dissolve the partnership. You're stuck. So I have been the lawyer fighting for businesses where we've had to go to business court. It's taken years and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars just to even get to the point where who can be the lawyer for the business because the two partners don't agree. So I try to tell people, nobody listens, when you go into an agreement, a partnership with someone, just make someone 51%, even if for management decisions. Even if you split the profit 50-50, give someone that extra vote. And if you're not willing to say one of you gets the extra vote, then have a tie-breaking mechanism in your documents. You know, back to my joint venture with Joyce, if we can't agree on something, maybe Cheryl's our tiebreaker because we know, love, and trust her, and we know she won't play favorites. She'll just do a reasonable thing. Have a tiebreaker mechanism. Very important. When you are in a business deal with someone, please pay attention to the finances. Can't tell you how many times people get embezzled. Things just mysteriously slip out of the cash box or whatever it is. Pay attention. Ask for the bank statements. It's not a mistrust thing. Everybody should be above board and transparent on the finances. All right. Contracts. If you're, and this is along the lines of the joint venture agreement, but it's really for any contract. Always have a written contract. And you know that when you're dealing with real estate, it has to be written anyway in most cases, or it's not going to be a valid contract. If it's anything that extends more than a year in writing, in real estate, it's not going to be a valid contract unless it's in writing. Know what's in your contract and read it. I've said that now at least 3 or 4 times, but it's true. Nobody reads it. I prepare these beautiful documents, or used to, for people, and they'd come in and I'd say, okay, did you read the document? You got any questions? Oh, I didn't read it. What do you mean you didn't read it? I've had it for 3 weeks. Well, I trust you. No, don't trust me. I'm the lawyer. I might have misheard you. You need to read it. Make sure what I put in there was exactly what you want. We've talked about using clear language, building contingencies and exit strategies into the documents. And here's one a lot of people don't know if they didn't go to law school. Make sure there's consideration in your contract. Some of you who do a lot of contracts know what that means, right? Have consideration. So if you ever notice a contract, it says for $10 and other valuable consideration hereby offered or whatever. That consideration is important because in order to make a contract valid, you have to have 3 things. An offer. I make an offer to Leah. She has to accept it. And then there has to be consideration. That's what brings us together into a valid contract. Consideration, as my law school contracts professor said, can be a peppercorn is a peppercorn is a peppercorn. Doesn't have to, it could be a peppercorn. It could be $1. It can be, hey, I promise to come clean your bathroom because I know you hate it. Whatever it is. Each party is giving up something for consideration. Otherwise, you do not have a valid contract. That's true for you real estate agents. You always have to have consideration in the contract. Otherwise, somebody can argue it's not valid and get out of their contract with you. Okay. Land trust. We've talked a little bit about land trust. Land trust can be great for anonymity, smokescreen, flexibility and ownership, ease of management, ease of dealing with multiple beneficiaries. There are cases in which land trust is absolutely a great thing to do. In some cases, however, when somebody thinks it's the end-all to be-all in creditor protection, it's not. It's in and of itself, but it's not creditor protected instrument, okay? So if I own a house in a land trust and that land trust gets sued and the plaintiff wins, they can take the house in the land trust. Whether or not they can come get my personal assets depends on how I've set it up. So for instance, I would never name myself as an individual beneficiary because then there's no wall between the land trust and me and all my personal stuff. So if I name Mary Hart as the beneficiary of my land trust, it's wild, wild west out there if the land trust gets sued. Instead, what I would do is either name an LLC as the beneficiary of my land trust, or maybe if I want even more layers to make people have to bust through, maybe I would name a personal property trust as the beneficiary of my land trust, and then name my LLC as the beneficiary of the personal property trust. Well, again, how paranoid are you? How much do you want to spend on, fees and tediousness? But never name an individual as the beneficiary. I can almost say that with 100% certainty. Any of you land trust people disagree with that? No. Okay. If there are multiple beneficiaries, I would have written beneficiary agreements. What does that mean? Just like a joint venture or partnership. How do these beneficiaries deal with each other? What are their rights and obligations, right? If I've got 3 or 4 of us, multiple beneficiaries in a land trust, how can any one beneficiary get out of it if they want their money out? What happens if we don't have majority rule? All these things that you need to write into a beneficiary agreement when you have multiple people. Name successor beneficiaries. If the LLC that you've named as a beneficiary is dissolved, is there a successor beneficiary listed? Name successor trustees. What if your trustee dies? And if you want to preserve anonymity, do not name yourself as the trustee. That defeats the purpose. All right? We talked about asset protection starting early, whether that's with land trusts or LLCs or setting things up in other people's names, which I would be very careful about doing. I know lots of people who over the years have put assets in their spouse's name for creditor protection because one spouse was, say, a high-powered gynecologist and subject to lots of potential malpractice suits. They put everything in the spouse's name, and then they get divorced, and now it's everything owned by the spouse. Oops, right? Speaking as a divorcee, I thought I'd be married forever, and I wasn't, through no fault of my own. Okay, so avoid fraudulent transfers. We talked about that. Don't run out and do asset protection when you know a claim's coming down the pike. If you're doing entities, follow the formalities. Make sure that you're not commingling your personal funds, you're keeping the books. And although with an LLC, it is not required to have an annual meeting or have minutes from your annual meeting, or even required to have an operating agreement, I would recommend that you have all of those. And the reason I say that is because for many, many, many years, judges were used to dealing with corporations where the law required bylaws, annual meetings, minutes for meetings, blah, blah, blah. If I take something to court and I'm being sued and I'm saying, look, I don't have operating agreements or minutes of meetings because it's not required legally. I don't trust that that judge will understand the difference sometimes because they're used to dealing with corporations. Now, it's gotten a little bit better as LLCs have been around longer, but just be careful about that. If you forget your personal checkbook and you're out to lunch and you want to use your company card and there's no justification for it, go hungry. Don't eat the lunch. Sorry, Tommy. That had to have been Tommy, right? Yeah. Just because that's a little...
about real estate, that qualifies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But what you don't realize is sometimes it's the little things like that that can bite you. You've done everything right, but you misplaced your personal credit card for a month. It was in a pocket of a jacket you couldn't find. You just paid on your business card, and you were going to get around to paying yourself back. Oops, you forgot. Or paying your business back. That's something somebody can use to set aside all the creditor protection your entity gave you. They say she's just treating that as her personal playground. Right? It's just like her own self. You just ignore all the creditor protection your entity just gave you. So please follow the formalities. Okay, on retirement plan beneficiaries. I know we're going fast, but and we may have time for questions. I'll try to get through the rest. Yeah, Nate did a great job on retirement plans, so I'm not going to talk about a whole lot. I just do want to reiterate that retirement plans can be a great way to build wealth, but they can also destroy your wealth quickly if you don't follow the rules. So if you're going to invest with your self-directed IRA, please invest in the education to learn and understand who is a disqualified party to your IRA and what the prohibited transactions are if a disqualified party is around, is part of the deal. And let me give you an example why that's important. In my example I'm going to give you, and it's a very real example, you can have up to 160% in penalties and interest for a deal that seemed like a great deal for everybody involved. I'll give you an example. So let's say that I have $100,000 in an IRA, and my son wants to borrow that $100,000 for an investment. And it's a great deal. He's paying me a huge interest rate. It's great for my IRA. It's great for him. Why wouldn't we do that? Because he's a disqualified party, black and white, automatic, under the law, disqualified party vis-a-vis my IRA, and a loan between my IRA and him is a black and white prohibited transaction. No way to argue otherwise, period, done. So let's say we make that loan, I get audited, the IRS finds out about it. Let's say I made that loan on December 12th of 2019. The IRS will treat that IRA as if the entire IRA, let's say it was only $100,000, but what if it had been $500,000 in there? Treat the entire IRA as if it had been distributed out to me on January 1 in the year in which that transaction happened. So for my example, let's assuming it's a traditional IRA, meaning subject to income taxes when it comes out to me. So first of all, that's $100,000 came out to me, come out to me as a distribution. I'm going to say I'm in the 30% tax bracket. Boom, $30,000 in income taxes. I'm under 59 and a half, 10% premature distribution penalty. Boom, another $10,000, right? My son, as a disqualified party, is subject to a 15% excise tax. Boom, $15,000. What are we up to now, 55,000? Right? And let's say I don't completely make this whole and undo the whole transaction within a certain period of time. It's a 100% penalty, $100,000. I just had to pay the IRS $155,000 in interest. That's not even including interest. That's just the penalties. So if I hadn't paid it, let's say they took 3 years to audit me, and it had been going through interest all those years, now I'd also owe interest and penalties. So that really great black and white deal that was great for my IRA, great for my son, was a black and white prohibited transaction and just blew my wealth in that IRA, gone. Almost twice what was in there, gone, because I didn't know what I was doing. So if you're going to play in the IRA world, which I think you all should, don't get me wrong, know the rules, follow the rules, and do the more vanilla variety things that can't get you in trouble because the penalties are just too severe. So I like what Nate said. I do a lot of promissory notes in my IRA. My IRA loans money all the time, and then I invest in private placements, LLC interest, because they're easy. When you're doing the retirement plan investing, and I think Nate had a slide with this, you've got to make sure and title the asset correctly. So let's say I had an account at Quest IRA, and that IRA was buying a piece of property or was a lender on a note. The titling has to read Quest Trust Company, CFBO, custodian for the benefit of Mary Hart IRA, account number blah, blah, blah. It has to be Quest Trust Company, custodian for the benefit of Mary Hart, IRA. If it just said Mary Hart, IRA, that's not a legal title. It could be deemed to have been distributed out to me. So I would just be very careful about that. David Phelps went over the Secure Act that's recently passed in December. It limits the stretch out over life expectancy payments for beneficiaries. I don't have time to go into all that, but you should know that. And if you have an existing estate plan that has IRA or retirement plan benefits passing through a trust, you need to have your attorney look at the language in your estate planning document to make sure that trust will still qualify for at least the 10-year stretch. Okay, so that's way more details than I can go into right now, but just talk to your attorney if you have retirement plans with beneficiaries, and especially if you have it in a trust. Okay, estate plan. Make an estate plan. If you are 18 or over, you need an estate plan. I don't care if it's a will on a cocktail napkin that says, I'll leave everything to Mary Hart, and thank you very much, I appreciate that. Just do something, and it could be very simple, but the documents that every 18 and over needs, every person 18 years old or over needs, you should have at a minimum a will that says anything that's in your separate name at the time you die, where it goes when you die, and how it goes, outright, in trust, whatever. You should have a health care power of attorney, who makes your health care decisions if you become unable to do so. You should have a durable power of attorney, which is who makes your financial decisions or anything non-health care related if you are unable to do so. I want to tell a little story about that one because this is key. I use the term durable power of attorney for a reason. Durable is a key word. What that means is that that power of attorney explicitly states that it will remain in effect in the event of a subsequent disability. So when I sign my power of attorney, I'm perfectly competent to sign it or else I couldn't sign it. But let's say I go get hit by a bus and now I'm in a coma. I'm under a subsequent disability. If my power of attorney does not have a sentence that says something like, this power of attorney shall remain effective in the event of a subsequent disability. If that language is missing, then by law, that power of attorney was revoked the moment I became incapacitated. Done, gone, nobody can use it. So one of the first things I did as a baby lawyer 30 years ago, 29 years ago, I was practicing in Juneau, Alaska, and you can't get in there from roads. You have to fly in or boat in. And I had a woman boat in from Ketchikan, and she was in her probably late 70s at the time. Her husband was in his 90s and was in an Alzheimer's unit in Ketchikan. Didn't even recognize her. They were real estate investors. They had lots of apartment buildings and single-family homes and all that, but they didn't have much cash. And so she came in and just said, I need to get a deed from my husband to me so I can sell this apartment building so I can pay his $12,000 a month hospital bills. The wing for Alzheimer's was $12,000 a month in 1991. Can you imagine what that would be now? But anyway, so she comes in and she hands me her power of attorney and she hands me the legal description for the property, and I look at them and I'm saying, I can't do a deed for you. What do you mean? I'm his power of attorney. I'm sorry, it doesn't have that language in it that meant that he's incompetent. That's revoked by law the moment he became incompetent. I couldn't do the deed. So what did that mean? That meant we had to start a guardianship proceeding to get her appointed as his legal guardian. And in the state of Alaska at the time, we had to notify all of his adult children, including one that had been estranged from the family for over 45 years, and that the grandparents, granddad and step-grandmom, because she was not the grandparent, had raised the child of that child. So this adult daughter who had not talked to the family in 45 years had to get notice that this guardianship was going. And my client, the wife, was terrified that this woman was going to come back and stop the proceeding. And she was about to lose a sale on a giant apartment building. In fact, I think she did lose the sale because it took 2 years to get this guardianship finalized because of all the stuff that happened. So, and that's all because it missed one sentence in the power of attorney document. One sentence. If you guys do nothing but this, go home if you have this document and look for that sentence. This power of attorney shall remain effective in the event of my subsequent disability, or something like that. It needs to have language that makes it endure through a subsequent disability. Otherwise, you're going to end up in court if somebody needs to act for you. So I have a lot of people who've said, well, I'm too broke to need an estate plan. I'm too young to need an estate plan. I'm married, so I don't need an estate plan. My spouse will get everything. Wrong, 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 wrong. I have 3 sons who are all over the age 18 now, and they all got an estate plan for their 18th birthday. And the reason is because even though I preached this and have for 29 years, when my eldest turned 18, he had to have his wisdom teeth removed on his 18th birthday. It's my oldest child. I've been signing his medical stuff for years. I go into the periodontist or oral surgeon or whoever it was. I start filling out the paperwork, signing it, and they go, "You can't sign that document." I'm like, "No, I'm the mom." "Yeah, I can. I'm the mom." They're like, "He just turned 18 today. You're out. You have no authority over this child for anything." I was like, "Oh my gosh." I tell people that every day and I forgot. It's terrible, I forgot. And so as soon as that boy came out of surgery and out of all his drugs, I said, "Sign here." Read it first. Sign here. So they all got an estate plan. Because I don't care even if you have nothing, somebody's got to be appointed to figure out you have nothing or pay your bills or do whatever. And if you don't have a will, then they're going to have to pay a bond out of their own personal pocket. If nothing else, waive the bond requirement for them so they can do your dirty work without having to pay out of their pocket. All right, so those are the minimum documents. You may also want a revocable trust to avoid probate, but that's a whole day-long, conference in and of itself, so we're not going to go that. I think this is my last thing I want to say. This is critical. I know I've said that several times. There's so many critical things. Take the time to learn how assets pass at death, because everybody thinks that everything goes through a will, right? Not everything goes through a will. People, "Well, it's in my will. I've got my will that leaves everything to Jim and Cheryl." Well, guess what? That's a joint piece of property I own with Joyce. It doesn't go through my will. It goes directly to Joyce as the surviving joint owner. It depends on how it's titled. So the ways that assets pass at death is very important. The first one is anything owned in your separate name. It's in Joyce Sims's name. She has no joint owner with a right of survivorship. It's not in a trust. There's no pay on death beneficiary. The deed to her house just says Joyce, right? That is a separate asset that will go through her will if she has one, or if not, it will go through the legislative will. Every state's legislature has created a will for you, whether you knew it or not. And they try to figure out where you'd want things to go if you died without a will. And it's like, okay, it goes first to your kids if you have any, or to your spouse and your kids. If you don't have those, it goes to your parents, and it goes to all these different families. You may not want your stuff to go to any of those people that the state wants it to go to. You might want it to go to your church or to your charity or to your nieces and nephews or your best friend, your network. I mean, I'm available, right? So if something is in your separate name, I suggest you have a will. It can be very simple. It could say something as easy as, I, Mary Hart, make this my last will and testament. I name Jim as my executor. I direct him to pay all my debts and then distribute everything else to Cheryl. Sign it, date and sign it, that's it. And if you write it all in your own handwriting, then probably in every state, you'd have to check your state's laws, that's a valid will without witnesses or notary if it's all in your own handwriting. So if you're on the plane that's about to crash on the Turkish Airways and split in half, quickly jot your will down on a cocktail napkin, and if it survives, it's valid. If you don't, and it does, right? But anyway, have a will for things in your separate name. The other way it passes, if you have a joint tenant, let's say that Joyce and I are on a deed, and it reads, Joyce Sims and Mary Hart as joint tenants with a right of survivorship. That right of survivorship means if she survives me, she has a right to the property. The moment I take my last breath, Joyce owns that whole property. Doesn't matter if in my will I left it to Jim and Cheryl. It doesn't pass through my will. It was not in my separate name. Wrong document. Goes directly to Joyce. Now, if on the deed it said Mary Hart and Joyce Sims as tenants in common, that just means, my 50% is treated in my separate name and goes through my will. Her 50% goes through her will. Know how things pass at death, or you're not going to have your wishes effectuated. If it is a type of asset that has a pay on death beneficiary, like an IRA, a 401k, a life insurance policy, some bank accounts, some stock accounts, and you have designated who's getting it, that person will get it. That's a contract that says that beneficiary will inherit that asset, right? So again, if you have, I'll tell you an exact story. I represented 2 young men, they were in their early 20s, whose mom had died in a scuba diving accident. Some of you have heard this story. And she was in a partnership. She had a partner. They were not married. And she, in her will, Let me think how she did this. No, when she got state of Alaska benefits, she did a beneficiary form that said the partner got 25% and the kids split 75%, because they're relatively newer in the relationship. Sometime along the way, she created a will, and she said in her will, I leave my state of Alaska retirement benefits 50% to my partner and 50% to my kids. She died in her 40s in a scuba diving accident. What do you think happened? What controlled, the will or the beneficiary designation that was done years earlier? The beneficiary designation controlled. So the partner thought she was going to get 50%. She didn't get 50%. So she goes after the sons trying to force it. The sons hire me. They were nice guys. We ended up negotiating, and the partner got more than she would have gotten, but less than the deceased person assumed she would get or wanted her to get, because she didn't understand the way assets pass at death and the right document to use, right? I see it every day when I'm practicing law. Don't see it now because I'm not practicing law. The other way is if you have a trust, land trust, revocable trust, irrevocable trust, doesn't matter. But if that trust names beneficiaries and there are assets titled in the name of that trust, then any assets held in that trust will pass to the trust beneficiaries per the terms of the trust. So even again, if I have a will that leaves everything to Jim and Cheryl, if it's in my estate planning trust and I say Joyce gets it or my husband gets it, Jim and Cheryl won't get it. It goes by the terms of the trust. So when I do estate planning boot camps, the first piece of homework I tell people to do is go get a chart, like Excel spreadsheet, a table on Word, whatever it is. Write down every single asset you have an ownership interest in, whether it's 1% or 100%. How is it titled? Is it in my name separately? Do Joyce and I own it with a right of survivorship? Do Joyce and I own it as tenants in common? Does it have a designated beneficiary? I want to list every asset I have, and I want to write down how it passes at death. And then that will tell me what documents I need to either have in place or change to effectuate my wishes. And I cannot tell you how pervasive it is that people don't understand how it passes, or even if they understand, they've forgotten how they set it up and they've made an assumption that's incorrect. So many times people will say, well, this is a joint bank account. My husband and I have a joint bank account. Great, I'll say, okay, say the husband died. Was that with a right of survivorship or without? Oh, I'm sure it was with a right of survivorship. We don't need any probate. It goes, it comes directly to me because my spouse died. All right, can you go get me the signature cards at the bank so we can have that for a file? Brings back the signature cards. It is not joint with right of survivorship. Some teller has marked joint without a right of survivorship. People make mistakes. Know how things are titled. And I know I'm beating a dead horse with this, but this is probably the biggest mistake I've ever seen in my 30 years of being lawyers. People don't understand how things do. So I want to leave you with one quote. This is another Jim Rohn quote. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for fewer problems, wish for more skills. Don't wish for fewer challenges, wish for more wisdom. And I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you.